This is Senate Appropriations, and what we're going to do this afternoon between now and we have to finish up because this room is going to be used for other purposes at 4:30, is to have Stephanie go through sort of a high level what is in the budget. And I guess you're going to focus on one time.
So I handed out a sheet
budget.
Handed out a sheet that Sarah initially put together that summarizes the House budget as they voted it out of the committee yesterday. Has organized the one-time expenditures in the back of the bill in the B1100s. B1100 is the miscellaneous section. B1101 are their workforce and economic development. B1102 is housing. B1103 is climate and environment. They pulled the pension pieces out to their own line item, own section of the 1100s. And then they've also, their bill is appropriating the pieces, the projects in the capital that are approved by the capital committee, but are coming from what was called the cash fund. They've renamed the fund because the underlying source in that fund is general fund. So those appropriations are actually happening in the big bill. And then they have, so what I was going to go over today was just to sort of quickly walk through not every single line item, but it's, $200 some odd million of one-time expenditure in this bill. And then they've reserved about $96 million, I think, for the child care bill on their side.
Family leave or child care?
Child care, which includes what the governor had in his budget. They pulled it out of the budget. And so they've just set aside a chunk of money anticipating the child care bill. And I think that's 96 or 93 $million.
That's one-time money.
So it's half and half. They pulled the governor's base money out. So half of that is base money and half of that in their construct is about 46 of it is what is.
Even though it would be ongoing obligation.
So or their base will be higher than it looks right now if it's all dedicated to the base. So there are in this build of FY24 budget, that balance of base and one time is you'll have to decide what your comfort level is on that. The childcare pieces are ongoing commitments, and the pension pieces, frankly, are ongoing. The pension plus commitments are ongoing. So those might, you might take a different tack and put them right in the base right now. For the time being, the House has sort of set them aside, and
but frankly, they're ongoing till 2038.
Yeah. So, but it's, by the time you're out of here in conference, hopefully we have a clear picture of what you want to have on what the comfort level is, where the base should be versus the one time. And every other state that I'm aware of is sort of struggling with that same construct. But the sheet you have, the packet of sheets you have in front of you are, and I didn't send them to, but we can give the document number to Andrea, and she can post it if it needs to be posted. But I'm going to say don't get too attached to it. The House will do a new version, and when we get to markup in 2 weeks, we'll have a.
I don't think our risk of getting too attached to this is great.
All it does is summarize what is in the sections of this bill in multiple pages of narrative on several pages of spreadsheet.
Oh, this is extra.
What's GC?
So GC is global commitment. So when they're, yes, and see how it's separated because it's a duplication. So when you look at the little yellow, sort of pale yellow ones, the real money is what's on the left-hand side.
What is really hard to keep, and the governor had his long list at one time. I've never had so many one times. And is there some way that we could code these that are in both the governor and the House?
We will do that. I think that's what we wanted. So you understand which is. So many of these are the same exactly as the governor recommends them, and some of them are at a different level, but they're the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the governor made choices about 1 or 2 year projects with a chunk of money. The House decided to do things that this is how much we can spend the first year. We'll only appropriate that.
So
I hate to add this, but the other thing we had is we had all of those requests that came from the 2 minutes and from outside of that. is there some way that we can get a column of what's in the governor's, what's in the House's budget, and what that is too, so we can
We
see?
do have that.
Yes,
So
but
we
we
have
have
a bunch
that
of-
in a separate sheet
We have
too.
the sheet that you have that was the culmination of the public hearings plus whatever anyone sent in, that sheet. That sheet was netting out anything that was in the governor's recommend. We can continue to net out anything that's now in the House recommend.
I didn't realize it netted out that,
That was constructed purposely to
See what else is
okay,
out there.
I didn't
What's up
realize
top of
when
the
that
governor.
went.
And we can, that we need to go back to that sheet with now what's in the House's version. And then some things that the House didn't do that, might have been supported on there. It's a back and forth. And then you also have your list of things that you have pulled out of bills.
And there are a lot of them, $750,000 to start up the pension.
Yeah,
And the
Vermont
treasurer,
saves, yeah.
we've got a number of $100,000 for study for divestment.
Well, and then the bills we passed childcare and everything.
So the childcare passed with appropriations in it. Those are accounted for on the Senate side. It's clean heat passed with appropriations in it. It's the only two bills you passed out with actual appropriations in it. But those get accounted for first.
Close and-
So maybe that's me.
That's your phone?
Safer to keep
Turn it upside down or decide about it.
Add aggression, you want to take it? So,
I don't know ours, man.
Put them on speaker. I don't.
I'm fine with that.
hello, Adam.
I'm happy.
This is not Stephanie.
I love that.
This is Jane, and I'm in the midst of a hearing, but her phone was on, so she grabbed it. What? No, I'm on Zoom, I'm on whatever, YouTube, so I can't carry on a conversation.
You are.
You're doing a good job of not turning it on.
All right, I'll tell her to call you. Bye. Anyone want to hire me as an administrative assistant? I'd be fired.
That was pretty smooth.
What do you want?
You may not want to be.
I can't talk to you, I'm on Zoom. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Just the way.
So you can give them a call. All right. Boy, there's a lot here, 58.
Where are we?
The governor had quite a few though.
He had quite a few. There's, so in the miscellaneous section, there's $94 million of general fund.
See, the governor had 237. It's all right here in the
Yeah.
budget book, in case you're interested.
And so I don't know, I don't know what the pleasure of the committee is in terms of walking through this. Do you want me to just sort of highlight a few of the things that changed significantly?
Yes, that would maybe a big good place to
Can
start.
I? from a
Yes, you
high
may,
level
what do you
ask?
want?
I want to know, did the House leave anything left on the bottom line?
So it depends on how you look at it.
Because my only concern, well, my big concern about that is we don't now be a little prepared for when the economy goes down. It will not be good.
So that is a big consideration in your balance of how much can be spent on the base and how much needs to be spent on truly one-time, don't count on the money being there again. That is the main thing that would drive your decision on where you land on that. When you say, did the House leave anything on the bottom line, to me, that is the box that you're living with for 24. And the governor, you live with a forecast that you adopt from the emergency board, and you tally against that, you score against that, on the spending side and on the revenue side. And so the House has made choices in spending that has, they are, in their leave bill, there's $37 million of one-time money that they've appropriated in 24 for the first year startup of their leave bill. If that leave, the Senate, I don't know if the Senate will have a leave bill that is separate from the piece that you did in the child care bill. But those all have to be sort of put up against each other. They have that $96 million set aside for child care. You have funded child care in 24 with the repeal of the child tax credit, so you're at a very different level for 24 in funding, and you have funded it with revenue in 25. And so those differences, when you're done with balancing your budget, you will utilize in some fashion, whether or not you reserve or transfer into reserves, you will utilize everything that's available in the general
How
fund.
much did the governor leave on the bottom line of his?
I don't think he did.
Well, and I think the governor or
He reserved
Adam would
it, he
say.
reserved it
would say
for
he-
the match for
Yeah.
IIJA.
So that's what I think that you would hear from the fifth floor, that they reserve both within the cash fund, money to match water and sewer, and money to match transportation as in future years. And those are all choices that you're gonna, in those 2 weeks of markup, are gonna make.
And it gets even more connected with the fact that the T-bill, as it's coming out of the House, actually increases fees. And those fees are going to be assumed when we're looking at what we reserve, because those revenues that come from fees actually will be there rather than the redirection of general fund that is proposed in the governor's budget, which was a total of 78 million for 3 years. One-time general fund were being used to be the match for the FHWA 80-20 match, which is the routine revenue support for the T-bill. And then there was an additional, the balance was to serve as the required match to draw down all the IIJA money. So he was taking a lot of general fund to support transportation initiatives. But we've had some discussion around, we're supposed to be doing a fee bill by statute every 3 years. And this year, the decision was made to move a transportation fee bill, and Chris helped work on those fees and what they would generate in year 1, which would be less than the full year, but that has a direct impact of revenues on what we have as we build up.
How short is that? If we've been transferring southern,
It just started, this is his first year of proposing it. Now, supposedly, the statement was made, well, we will support a fee bill if you get rid of the JTOC transfer and the transfer, not the transfer, it's
The allocation.
the allocation of the purchase and use.
The 1/3.
Over to the education fund, which was put in place with Act 60 in terms of that revenue source. On the other hand, the transportation transfer to, there's only one now, it's to public safety. Years ago, there used to be many different transfers. There's been one for many years. It's down to around $20 million. And that is really for the cost of enforcing your highway laws. And in New Hampshire, DMV actually does all highway enforcement. They have their own unit. I don't believe our DMV department could enforce highway laws statewide for $20 million. So, to me, it's not using transportation money in an inappropriate way, because it may be much more cost effective to really do it in partnership with public safety. And so there's only that one transfer of 20 million at this point.
So can I ask, how much is the total fee bill in transportation in the House budget?
Well, Chris will be able to tell you, it's in the T-bill,
Yes.
but ultimately the budget, and it is
Well,
ways and
all of
means.
them, well, there's two. There's the construction bill, and then there's transportation, the spending gets authorized in the
That's
state.
right.
For me, it's all in the same package. How much, and does what they did totally take care of the issue of making the match going forward? Or to make the match on those federal
Well,
funds, would we still need some more?
We would maybe for this year. But Chris and Stephanie can answer that question, but because I think the issue is they can't implement the fees until January. So they only got a partial year to draw on. And so,
the annualized amount is how much?
Yeah, what, the fully, Christopher joint fiscal, the fully annualized amount would be approximately $21 million of additional revenue. And the gap that was projected by the administration is 33 to 34 million.
Okay.
So, and since, as Senator Hidgel noted, it is DMV's core modernization project, the fees as proposed in the House would go live on January 1. So I would assume approximately $8 million of revenue in the second half of FY24. It'd be a little less than a half of a year's revenue.
but it would go certainly, and once you're getting to a full year of fees.
But you're getting to a full year of fees, you're getting to a place of about 2/3 of what the match that's needed.
Well,
The 33.
Yeah.
mhm, yeah. So, so obviously that has a huge interplay in terms of what you're freeing up for general fund compared to what the governor was proposing to use the general fund for. So the fees are going to be in the T-bill, but the appropriation for the transportation plan, of course, is in the budget. So.
And did they take the IJA, the governor, and they made all the match as the governor did?
So they are
You
funding
talking about what they did in the budget?
Yes.
in the House?
Yes.
So the House in 24 has the $10 million needed for FY24.
Okay.
They do not dedicate any future general, reserve any general fund that's available right now in the viewfinder for making up that difference for the half year. So that's, and then they do have money though that they didn't spend out of the former cash fund capital infrastructure reserve that may, that on the water and sewer side of IIJA that may be available to the capital bill for those match pieces. It's not defined, as far as I know. The governor was very specifically holding, he had a much bigger, the capital bill is smaller than the governor proposed. So less money is going to the cash fund in the House's construct than under the governor. And they are spending a lesser amount in the capital bill than the governor did in total with the cash fund pieces.
Yes, Bonnie.
So why can't we start the fee deal in June?
Because they're in the process of replacing their IT system, and that core part won't be ready until January to put in all these new fee amounts. And the last thing we want to do is anything to derail or jeopardize the successful implementation of that core component of the DMV system. So that's.
It isn't time, it's just time for them.
Yeah, it's a matter of when that new system is there and they can input these new fees. So this is kind of a whole different world, so to speak, in terms of fees in the bill, and then the extent in which there's that budgetary impact. There was also money for $3.5 million that was in the transportation plan to do grants along the Royal Valley. That got pulled out. And we can put it on our list of the extent to which we want to fund it. They were proposing to use general fund for that as well.
Oh,
And there was also a highway garage in St. Albans. So the use of general fund in the transportation world was fairly extensive. So some of that we'll have to consider as just part of the budget process.
They've been getting along with their garage for 20 years.
Well, they maintain the way it's located and driving through the city of St. Albans is less.
It's really difficult.
Well, I can see the Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Why don't we go on, Stephanie, and
So,
go back to this document here?
Sure. And The language that goes with all of these appropriations, et cetera, in the budget, if you wanted to check on any of those, but starting at the top, the language access plan, that was in the governor's recommend, but they did half of it, sort of the first design and build the language access plan, but the implementation, they put that sort of on they didn't make contingent appropriations, they sort of made a priority list for if we do have money in the general fund or the special funds that carry forward from 23 to 24, they made a statement of priorities and funding and they'll.
Do we have a description? And we haven't had the agency of administration come in.
Right, they're in next
So,
week, I think sometime.
Who has agency of administration? You do. Okay, so, I mean, it seems like we need to have a little more information about what the language access plan is and the total cost. Well, we'll find out next week apparently, when they come in.
S4, they set aside basically 5 million of the 10 million that the governor had in S4.
And there was, the other thing I just wanted to make sure that we looked at, and that was Congress passed Safer Communities Act. And I'm wondering if there's an interconnection between what these Sears Community Safety Grant Program is and a possible additional funding through that federal act. I mean, it seems like that's the whole goal is around communities, the safety of community, the violence and so forth. So I'm just wondering the extent to which when this discussion was occurring over the summer and then maybe this act got passed subsequently, the extent to which there's a nexus there or additional funding that could help.
Sure. I think our intent all along was to use federal funds over general fund or settlement funds over general fund if they were available. So only using general funds where to get to the 10 million that we started with, where there wasn't an access to either settlement funds or federal funds. And I think Safe Street grants or that type of thing would certainly, I don't know what all the requirements are, but as long as it's not focused on police equipment and that sort of thing, I think that would be within what we intended.
Well, the reason I bring
You
it
know,
up.
we didn't want new SWAT teams, for example,
No.
that type of expenditure, but rather something like Project Vision in Rutland, where you look at a neighborhood, find that neighborhood to be where a lot of drug activity is going on, and you do things to rehabilitate that neighborhood and to make a change there. That's what we had in mind.
Yeah,
But-
and
So
the reason I was.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, because obviously, the more resources there are, and if the house has got the 5 versus in the 10, it would be helpful to know what the other potential funding sources are to support this initiative. That's all.
Oh,
I
our
know you
initial,
like the 10, Senator Sears.
yeah, no, our initial conversations were actually knowing the opioid money was coming in, and that some of that settlement could be used to help communities with innovative programs to deal with their opiate crisis in those communities. So I don't have an objection to getting to the 10 million or whatever number I would like to see it at 10 million, but whatever number we're at, it should still be a variety of funding sources, and at last, general fund for the remainder.
And the other thing, longer term, it struck me that we've allocating money from, well, not only from the settlement, but also from the cannabis revenue for prevention. And sometimes it just raises the question about, are there ongoing kind of programs or commitments that we want to have, as opposed to every year a grant application, which leads to tremendous instability, or you start something out and then something else. And I don't expect to address it now, but we have, for example, and the House has put it in money for mentoring. And in cannabis, we put money for after school. And that provides stability. Mentoring, to me, is primary prevention when you're dealing with kids at risk who are coming from very sometimes chaotic or vulnerable homes. And it was like, well, if you have to apply every year, it's sort of like doesn't provide assurances or stability if you're trying to build a program. And so I'm wondering if we ought to look at, out of these allocations, what kind of core activities that we would like to give that kind of continuity or assurances of funding. You have an opinion, Senator Lyons?
I do. I mean,
Okay.
and it relates to what I didn't say on the floor today, that I will say on the floor tomorrow with respect to the violence prevention work that Senator Sears is planning. But also to what we were talking about the other day, where we have a prevention council embedded in Department of Health. And we do have an opportunity. One of the things that our committee will be doing is just get a report in committee discussion going about what's happening with that. So because the whole point was to coalesce the boards and board activities and the board monies that were out there and to bring in more prevention dollars and to establish those ongoing programs to solve the problems. So what you're saying is exactly what the Prevention Council was designed to do. And now we have a Violence Prevention Council focusing on something which is parallel but connected. So we want those things to work together. I'm not sure that the language, all the language that we currently have is sufficient to have, a set of programs that are ongoing pop out. Some of them will, but some of them won't. So
What I'm thinking is we get them started, and then if the grants go away or the money gets reduced, then the request is for the general fund to pick it up.
Right.
And if we say it's really important, it just means that we're adding more money through the grants and we're putting more pressure on the general fund. And at some point, it seems like we have to do like we did with the cannabis revenue and say, we want to use it to support after-school programs because we think that they are a good investment and they are prevention and they serve our kids very directly.
I think we're saying the same
Yeah.
thing, just in a different way.
So, all right, well, good luck on that discussion.
I'm sorry to prolong the discussion, but if we are having the agency administration in, would you want to have some sort of piece from Monica Hutt, the chief prevention officer, sort of mapping the programs that exist?
That would be very helpful because we put it out ad hoc and I think we have a sense in totality what we have, in a variety of places. What?
The Prevention Council also has a director, and then the director is within the Department of Health, and then the chief prevention officer. Now we have a parallel violence prevention person. And so how those two things coordinate is important.
But I'm just talking about,
Monica could bring
Monica
this.
should,
Well, that,
Both the administrative structure that
Yeah.
now exists on all the prevention arms, and then the money that exists on
and
the
that
base.
might help with that discussion because so much of what we do is ad hoc and something one year and then a different thing. So what does it
depends
look
on
like in
federal
total?
dollars are there, right, we don't want that to be.
we did put that language in for all of the budgets to be reviewed through Monica's position last year.
And then they may have some deeper understanding than we do at the moment of what's potentially available in the federal fund, the federal bills that were passed.
That would be, so if Monica could do that and then that would help both committees. Okay, you'll take care of that then?
I will send a note and, I just want to make sure we have enough time when we do schedule the agency of administration next week and Will is here. Yeah.
Well, can you take the message back to your boss? Okay, thank you. That'll save Stephanie. We want you to earn your money while you're sitting here, so.
We'll say less.
Okay, let's keep going on the sheet or other comments here.
So the FEMA denial reserve, that's that's also in AOA, the agency administration. That was at $15 million, and the governors recommend that is related to FEMA claims, a budget based on some assumptions of FEMA claims coming in. But since the change in FEMA in July last year, they've assessed that some of them are high risk, and so the House did $5 million of the $15 million ask and has put as a priority, if needed, additional funding for FEMA claim, for denied FEMA claims on
These
their
are
list.
existing.
So I think their existing claims are claims that they expect to have, are expecting to come in, are expecting to be made, that they have assessed at a high risk position. And that was the basis of their funding, although
Although that might be one of the areas that we would say at the end of the year.
I think it's been conveyed that, it's from the administration's point of view, that funding for IIJA and transportation is a higher priority than FEMA claims backfill.
So then you would still use the money to do what the FEMA, state money would just use to repair the roads or what reimburse the towns.
Well, if the FEMA claims came in higher than what we have budgeted, it will be a BAA. That's all. It's just taking,
Or if we get actual denials that we have to address because we,
so the question is how conservative or how liberal you want to be
Yeah.
on the money you're setting aside for those potential
Or something
disallowances.
that's a gamble,
Yes.
if you don't know.
And it's money that the state had already spent.
I think it's money that either they've spent or they've budgeted and they expect to get back. We can get a little more detail on that, but the House choice here is to set aside $5 million instead of the 15 that came out of the gate from the governor.
And then the bridge funding for
Bridge
state.
funding is the same $9 million. The House discovered that the ARPA funded COVID, retro UI sort of piece that we did in S11, which never came through this committee last year, there's not a lot of uptake, and that was a $15 or $16 million program, and there's about 10.3 or something that can be redirected. And so the bridge funding in the state.
Well, do we have any of those hiding holes that you could tell us around there?
So that is one that the House Commerce Committee dug into because there is a choice in there because the program is supposed to stay open until September. And so, but based on the experience so far, they've made this decision.
And so DOL has it from what?
It's ARPA, and it was the COVID-19 sort of retroactive payment of I'll get the details for you. It was one of Senator Sorokin's last year, very, very important pieces of, in fact, we can get it from the fiscal note for Act 183 of last year.
Is that UI add-on?
Yes,
Oh.
yes.
That they couldn't administer because.
No, it's a different, this is the one that was looking back and,
Okay.
Andrea, if you could pull up the
No, it's
fiscal
okay.
note for
Who has Department of Labor?
I think,
All right,
Which
rather
one?
than well, it's just to find out what,
it's what's freeing up the 5.18 that can now be spent on bridge funding instead of on this program that seems to have a very slow, it is not being utilized.
that's,
It's Act number 183 of last session.
it was S11 that.
It was S11 and it's Act
So
183.
we'd just like to know what the money
Yeah.
was appropriated for.
It's the
that
COVID-19 UI related program, and I'm not going to do justice to it. Here.
And then state colleges, the tuition.
So that was, the governor had $10 million in there to scratch out the 50% piece there, because I don't think they quite funded 50% with their $4 million. He had a 2-year, let's bring the CCB tuition down for 2 years. He had $10 million. They said, well, they would do 1 year of it, but it's not quite 50%. I think it's a little bit less than 50% that their $4 million would buy as a reduction to CCB.
The question would be whether there's a commitment to some kids who have started the 1 year and one of the 2 years, and will just shut off any.
So this is just the sticker price of CCB.
Okay.
So it would allow them to
Okay,
reduce
no
the sticker
problem.
price a CCB coming in
Not
this
like
fall.
critical access.
Yeah,
no.
okay.
So that does cover them, then it's this.
So it's tuition whiplash on a steeper price. If you don't fund it again the next year, the tuition rates have to bounce back up.
So,
Maybe you'd be better off to do a more moderate amount, so you're not whipping it back in a
Right.
ping pong kind of thing.
so,
Yes, Rich.
so did you say the cost of doing half of the tuition is?
It's about
is-
$5 million, because the governor he said, cut the tuition in half. And he gave $10 million, and he gave $10 million to cut the tuition in half for 2 years.
2 years, okay.
And the House is doing 1 year, and they're doing a little bit less than half the amount the governor did. As I understand it, they didn't get it, the CCB didn't come and say, it costs less to do 50%, it costs, 20% less to do 50%. My understanding is
So the difference between the
10 million. and-
10 million in that is they said that it would cost 4 million to do it.
The House decided to do 4 million and buy down the tuition, whatever 4 million buys down
Okay,
For 1 year.
for 1 year.
I was trying to get how they got to 4 million, because
They were getting to a balance overall,
Okay.
and that's where that one landed.
that's my answer.
That's my understanding, that it wasn't perfect, because I asked, does this still pay, does this still cut it 50%? No, not really, not quite.
Okay, so it buys it down for a little less than the 5 million.
Yeah.
For 1 year, okay.
Okay, but they didn't, then they didn't commit to a second year.
All right, so now we have the
You have
human resources, and those were in the governor's recommendation.
those were in the record, the governor's recommended along with the medical leave startup.
And that has to be paid anyway, because if we don't do it, then state employees are
Then you
assured.
would, you would turn that into some sort of increase in pay to state employees, that same roughly $2 million. Whatever the value is.
Not the new position.
Not the new position. Not all, as I understand it, I thought all these positions were related to leave, but not all of them are. Some of them are other DHR needs, but they're funded, they're limited service positions. They're funded only for with one-time money.
And we haven't had,
Madam Chair, I believe the intention was that the next year they'd be rolled into the ISF for,
Oh, that's right,
so.
They would be covered by the charge of the overhead charge.
they'll be there.
Okay, that's.
Thank you.
They did put back in, the governor did not fund the tax assistance program that you funded last year in the base of the treasury, that got pulled out, and the House is putting that back. It is funding it with one-time money for another year.
Can I just ask, is the 1.9 is in the negotiated agreement with the SCA?
Last year's pay act has I don't know if the 1.9 exactly is, but the LEAD program is. And so if the LEAD program did not go forward, the value of the startup cost of the LEAD program has to be incorporated into the state employees' pay. I believe that's the general structure of what happened in pay act last year, or the contract last year.
So if I'm hearing you right, so state employees go into the family leave plan that the governor has
With
proposed.
a commercial
And-
insurer.
With a commercial insurer, and they're doing a separate bill for family leave for everybody else.
I think you'd have to ask the House about that. I think that the governor's, I think it's voluntary. I don't think you're automatically in as a state employee. Is that correct? I don't know enough about either plan, and if you want to hear from Joyce, I can.
But either way, there's no savings, because the agreement is, if
Yeah.
you don't move forward, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to pay it out to employees.
Yeah.
And
Now, I'm just trying to understand how
it fits with the other.
they mesh.
Maybe they do, maybe they do.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was-
Or this starts and then because their leave has got a longer startup timeframe,
okay, all right.
and then this gets folded into that potentially, I guess. I don't.
It's just
You're
not-
talking about the House large family leave bill.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So when that bill comes over, or whoever's gotten it, Joyce can probably explain a little bit of, I'm sure that was thought about.
I just can't. It's-
I'm not.
This was in the governor's as well.
This is the same level of funding that the House kept in, that was proposed by the governor.
Okay, and then the tax assistance, that is.
That is new on the House side, the governor did not fund that program. Last year you built it into the treasurer's base, the governor did not fund it in the base, and now it's being funded with one-time money.
That's to help people fill out their.
So the treasurer, yes, grants it out basically to the caps to help people with their income taxes. The processing their income taxes.
So it was in the 23 days. Okay. Libraries, Fiber Connect.
That's the same that the governor had proposed. There's 190, these are for the vests and the carriers of this equipment and public safety.
And
Personal
that's
equipment.
governor as well.
That's governor as well.
Then hiring incentives and loan repayment.
So that is a one-time money, pot of money. The governor had that in as well to help with
The vacancies at,
the state troopers essentially.
and what loan repayment are we paying?
Student loans.
Student loans?
That's what I remember from their presentation. Yes, they won't offer that.
That was in the GOVs.
We have the US
No.
Vermont.
But we don't have any Vermonters on the USS Vermont.
I
at
thought
this
there was
point.
one.
No, my nephew got transferred. He's in
Ah.
Naples, Italy. He's been
Maybe different stuff.
restationed. Yeah.
He's still on a submarine or? Well,
I don't know. I think
I'm on the surface.
I don't know. He took Naples over Hawaii.
I think once on a sub, probably always on a sub.
I think so. I'm telling you, not everybody can stand it. Well, it's pretty claustrophobic. Yeah.
It's pretty hard to look out the window.
You can pretend you're at the aquarium or something. All right, and so that is there, obviously. And then the honor flight, North Country honor flight, was that in the GOVs?
That was. I'll just mention one thing that was in the GOVs that's not in this proposal from the House is another year of funding for the 250th commission. The House
Oh,
decided not to fund that. The governor had proposed it.
How much?
It's 117 or 100. Oh, I'm
Well,
sorry.
it's on the one time?
It's on his one-time list. Yeah.
So that was what?
The 250th commission, the 250th
Oh, okay.
anniversary of Vermont Commission.
And who got that?
Probably.
It's a commission.
Yeah, but it's probably through ACCD or something like that.
Yeah. I was wondering what department we were,
It's probably, it either would be through AOA, do you remember? ACCD.
oh, yes, ACCD, 250th commission, 117,000, it's on the governor's.
Right. And that's very important.
How much?
Why, are the Shires leading that?
117.
17. We'll have this all on a sheet.
Is there any?
Why is it important? Well, because it's the anniversary of the Battle of Bennington.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna be there for the 300th, but I hope to make the 250th
All right.
celebration. But it's also other
When is it?
historic events, so I think it has
4 years out, maybe?
All right, so-
disappointing
well, we'll
that they're not
have
funding it. Other states are doing extensive work on travel and tourism for the anniversary. And we've been,
17.
not I, but members of the governor appointed have been meeting with those other states to coordinate events that will bring people to Vermont. And
All right, well, you're agreeing with the governor again, Senator Sears.
I am again agreeing with the governor, and Representative Morrissey should be right on this. I'll let her know that
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
get
it's
funded.
not in the House passed budget. How could that happen?
I don't know.
Well, you can be the.
I will
champ-
send her an email letting her know that it's
Oh,
not
I
in the
bet.
budget.
How
They
disappointed
haven't
you
voted
are
on
that it
that.
wasn't included.
They haven't voted on it yet, have they?
Was she just
No, not
elected
finally.
judge?
They voted out of committee.
She did. sign.
Right, so I would
That's
expect,
different. All right. All right, here's another one, CJC accreditation, the first,
So the governor funded all 3 years at 1.2, and you had the discussion about it when you had the bill on the
right,
interrogation methods. And so this is 1/3, it's the first year of that 3-year process.
if we intend to do it and we have the money, there might be some utility to having a commitment to get it from start to finish, but
Yeah.
we can come back
They
and,
they did list it on their next list of priorities if we have, carry forward money into 24,
okay,
but
well, if we have, if we are able to accommodate it, I would say if we're starting on this initiative, knowing how the economy and what the world might look like 2 or 3 years out, it might be better to think about, is this something that needs to be done and funding it? I would just like to have us come back and see if we want to do it, then have the commitment to see it from start to finish.
What's the accreditation?
Is, remember that it would be national and they would be redoing their whole curriculum, remember the.
training
Oh,
and criminal
right,
justice
right,
council,
For,
public safety law enforcement,
yeah,
law enforcement officers.
and we would be really first in the nation or one of the lead states, I think, in this curriculum and in the training and the accreditation. And I think we, as a committee, we felt that that was really a
It
good,
sounded really good,
good.
and it would be training for all levels, municipal, everything.
so we'll just note that, and obviously we'll have to see how big our red box is, but how we may want to allocate one-time money. It's going to be up to someone, we'll come back and look at it. And then the management system,
And the RFP for contracts, I believe those are the same as the governor proposed, same level.
Just random RFPs and contracts.
No, they were in that list of when the criminal justice council came and presented for that packet. They explained what they're for.
Defender General, is that in the governor's as well?
No,
That was new, okay.
that's, I don't believe it was the base management piece.
Maybe that was on his list of
I
requests.
believe it.
So, well, we'll just go through this. We're not committing to much of anything at this point.
And the EV charger stations were the same as that's the same as what was in the governor's proposal, same with food safety inspection database replacement. The next 3 in
The governor did propose a $25 fee to go with the.
yes, and that's on the revenue side of it, that's the same as well. They're counting on that same fee. But the next 3 items in ag, the Sustainable Jobs Fund, Salvation Farms, and the conservation districts are all new ads from the House that were not included by in the governor's proposal. for one-time expenditures.
Well, Salvation Farms, that's up in Johnson, Morrisville. We had them in and it was well presented and I think
Well,
pretty,
they're gleaning.
pretty good project for a
All
half
right,
a million.
Yeah, well, you can put it on your wish list. I mean, in terms, because you can see that what they did for ag is quite different than what the governor's proposing. And I don't think they actually, they
They don't have the 10 million that the governor had.
well, they don't even have the 9.1 that they
Yeah.
wanted to reserve for the
There we go.
organic farm.
You will see when we get to the workforce and economic development pieces, like the future of ag development, they did at $5 million, not at 10. So you will, there are several more sections in their bill where this is.
For the, for the different fund.
And we did have a secretary in the 10 million.
Yes.
They also,
They got,
No, but didn't we have Anson in to talk about that?
oh, yeah,
all right, so what they have is,
So starting with number 10 on this, now we're getting into the human service area.
Can
But
I
I-
just ask one more?
well, I'd like to go back, in terms of the Sustainable Jobs Fund, are you gonna take testimony and the extent to which, sustainable jobs versus working lands versus what the think we need to look at
I don't know what sustainable job fund is. You?
what's in the agency of
I
ag.
don't know, but we haven't heard any.
Well, so
I don't
I'm,
think they've gotten money for a while. I think they used to get money, didn't they?
well, we don't want unsustainable jobs.
The governor, yeah. I think the governor appoints the board.
The governor had 3 million in for working jobs, for working land.
And the House is only putting $1 million for that, the grants for working land. You'll see that in the third page in.
Okay.
We'll find out more of
All
that.
right, so if you could get some more information on that. Mental health, but competency and,
Yeah, the Superior House, I believe, is new. I know it's new, but half is.
and that was to purchase that.
Where is that one located?
No, the property itself,
Yeah.
It's in Burlington, right?
it's in Burlington or in the Burlington
It's in
area.
the Burlington area, but
I
it's
don't know
not
what town.
downtown. We do have one downtown already. I don't know if it's.
This one I think is not, making either South Burlington or Williston or something.
Okay.
Well, so that's obviously something to understand. And I'm thinking it's almost close to 4:30 and we're getting into mental, into human
Almost
services.
close, that's it, it's close.
Close to 4:30, so I'm gonna suggest we sort of wrap it up. Look through all the different, because different things are in different pots of money.
In terms of the blueprint pilot, they funded the first year of it. They did not fund the 2-year pilot in whole, the way the governor had proposed. They are having the pilot go forward, but they put the second year again on their priority list for.
What good does it do to fund it 1 year? Like not having a plan. The same thing we're talking about with prevention, so I will.
And I think the other thing we really need to understand is how that fits with, with the money that the FQHCs are getting specifically for mental health and substance use disorder. I think we've heard that they're getting money through HRSA. And then some might be coming through SAMHSA. And the big concern around that is how that fits if we're starving our mental health treatment systems. We're infusing money in other places that might be complementary, the extent to which we're adding on and doing new things at the same time.
Well,
Our core
Right.
services are
in a House
being,
bill.
so it could, I know that there's concern that more and more the easiest cases will be siphoned off. DAs will end up with absolutely the most costly, the most seriously and persistently mentally ill. They're underfunded and more money is going in to serve a different and less costly and intensive population. I don't know if that fear is concerned, but in terms of how that plays out, we need to make sure that that, in fact, doesn't have that kind of collateral impact. That's my only point.
Right, but you also want to ensure that the hub and spoke system is expanded in such a way that it covers mental health and substance use disorder more broadly as and integrated with the community health team. So that's.
Well, I know that Suboxone and a lot of the primary care practices are prescribing, and they do need the community teams, and they're working with that group now.
I know. So that, and I think that's what this is.
I think we need to be.
Yeah.
Take some more testimony fully.
I'm with you.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to suggest we call it an afternoon. It's been a long afternoon.
And I'll just, the last thing I'll mention, the governor had $26 million in the one time for the GA housing for next year. They made a choice they funded that same amount, but they moved 7.5 of it into the base as an ongoing funding source for the emergency housing. And so that's a difference in where parts of that landed.
All right, so I'm going to